My name is Ariel Johnson. I am the owner of Amalgam Comics and Coffee House. Thank you. We are honored to actually have two comic superstars with us today. The conversation will be moderated by Eric Battle, accomplished artist who has worked for, the heavy hitters in the comic world, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, just to name a few, and working on his own independent projects. And he is a great friend of the shop and an awesome guy. We love him dearly here. And of course, the man of the hour, Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates. Writer, journalist, and for the Geek Crew, the current X-Men, Black Panther. Hey, don't boo the X-Men. That's always where my heart is. No, to the X-Men. So there are going to be some fighting stuff happening out front with this gentleman here. No, X-Men for life. No, the current Black Panther scribe, Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's been a great run, and it's for me, it is a very different Wakanda than I am used to seeing. I got introduced to Panther during Hudlin's run, and this has just been a very an unstable Wakanda, which for me I have not seen before. So it's just interesting and just kind of delving into a deeper layer of this awesome African nation that has stood the test of time and the conquering and all that, and just seeing them in a weaker state, which I think is very interesting. So I appreciate your take on the work, and I will turn it over to Eric. Quick instruction: if you would like to ask a question, just to make it a little more organized, we have a mic here, and so we ask that if you want to ask a question, to get in line on the right side of the aisle, ask your question, have it answered, and file down the left side of the aisle and come back to your seat. And also we ask if you would limit, we just have an hour, so if you would limit it to one question, and ask your question quickly so that we can get as many questions in and have a really good conversation. All right, I appreciate everybody here. Thank you so much. And Eric Battle.
Thank you. Very, very happy to be here, and it's great to see this beautiful crowd. We are, again, here to speak to Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates about your run on the Black Panther. Just starting off, I just wanted to ask a basic question on how much preparation and research did you have to do when you got the project?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me here. It is extremely significant, for me to be at Amalgam. Because of some of the themes that are running through Black Panther, to be at a shop owned by a Black woman is extremely, extremely significant. I don't think I have to say this, but I'm gonna say this anyway. I hope you guys buy up this entire shop before you leave today. When I was a kid, Black people didn't own comic book shops. That just, at least, to my knowledge, that was not a thing that was going on in the Baltimore I was raised in. But I was raised by, a man who owned his own publishing company at the time. And so I am deeply, deeply steeped in the idea of Black people in this country owning, and controlling their own institutions. And so it's extremely, extremely important that you guys, Black and otherwise, patronize, this shop. So first of all, thanks for having me here. It was a ton of research. But I mean, you guys, do research, because basically what it was just reading comic books. I mean, that was the bottom line, so that wasn't too hard. I just had to get my hands on everything, Black Panther related, specifically, things that, had happened in the past 5 years. That was the most intense stuff. But I basically got my hands on anything Black Panther related and, read as much of it as I could.
Excellent. With with deciding on, well, how did you decide on what areas of the Black Panther universe that you wanted to focus on, given the history of the character and some of the other writers who have tackled him and the kingdom of Wakanda?
Well, I guess I feel like, almost like using the verb decide gives me more power than I felt I actually had. I am, there are a lot of debates, and as I'm sure you know, in the comic book world about the value of continuity. I'm that rare person that like really, really likes being lost. So I started, reading comic books when I probably was like 8 or 9 years old, and you guys notice, at least those of you who are old enough to be my age and of my generation. You pick up a comic book in 1985, and this comic book could be referencing something that happened 10 years ago, and there's no internet. So there's no iPhone to whip out and Google, what does this mean? How did Gwen Stacy die? You know what I mean? There's a little asterisk right there and says, see issue 120, whatever, which you probably can't find, by the way, because it's probably worth, X gazillion dollars. So you wait for, that Marvel Universe book to come out, or you might catch it in a reprint somewhere or whatever. That longing, that not knowing, I really liked that, you know what I mean? Because what it meant was that I was entering into a room, entering into a world that had history. It was like entering into any other, room or any other world, in the actual real world. If somebody takes me over, to meet their family, there are gonna be jokes. There are gonna be things, there's gonna be traditions that I don't necessarily get because I wasn't there. You know what I mean? And so coming into the Marvel Universe was like that. And so when I came into Black Panther, it was a whole host of, things that had happened. Probably, most significantly, for the current run, there were the events of, Avengers versus X-Men, where Wakanda had been flooded. There were the events that happened at the, at the very end of Reginald Hudlin's run, where Moreland comes through and, basically devastates a large portion of the country. There were, the events obviously that happened just before Secret Wars and Time Runs Out, where Wakanda was decimated. And the question I had to answer, at least it seemed to me, the prime question for me was, how does a country whose mantra is we've never been conquered deal with the fact that it's actually been successively conquered, or successively, successfully, attacked, within, the past, 10 years in terms of, our real time. What does that mean? Now, there was a way out of that. I could have completely, rebooted. There certainly was the, the opening, for that, to completely reboot and act like, none of that ever happened. I am not a huge fan of retcons, though. I think like part of the challenge of writing and reading comic books is the weight of history, and that way it mirrors the very real world. You're born into a historical condition, and then you have to make something out of that. And so I felt like when I, got the opportunity to write Black Panther, I was born into a historical, situation. And I had to write from that basis. I don't like the idea of just completely obliterating history.
Yeah, and I think readers appreciate that. I know I certainly appreciate that because, it gives the character weight, and to acknowledge that history.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Excellent. Wanted to open it up to, since this is a Q&A, we wanted to give people opportunities to ask questions about your run on the book. Now you just had the late issue 7 just came out, and you introduced the crew. I know I was very, very happy to see that cast of characters. Are we going to see more of them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. This is just Greg.
Greg Corbin. First of all, like I said, man, just much respect to you and thank you for everything you're doing for the community, the global community, especially, people of color, period. I didn't get to read the book yet. Please forgive me because I just got it today. But as a writer myself, as an artist, what were the personal discoveries you had about yourself, epiphanies you had about yourself as you explored what the Black Panther meant to you and to others?
Real quick, for the next question, we're going to come go around this microphone here, just so we know, so we can kind of keep moving. That way we don't have to pass my microphone.
That I don't want to be king. That I don't want to be, I mean, it was, yeah, really, exactly. Black Panther happened at a very interesting time. I was charged with writing this book right when Between the World and Me, was coming out. And I've been writing for 20 years. And that was a point in my career for the first time, like in my life, like people, I don't think it's too much to say this. Like people were trying to put a crown on my head, as a black writer, you know what I mean? Oh, you're the man now, in terms of, black folks and black writing and, you get to say X, Y, and Z about, and it was very hard, and it is very hard to this very day to say to people, I don't want any part of that. I mean, I bullshit you not. I just got an email this morning from somebody, I can't believe I'm saying this, from somebody asking me to direct a music video. And a buddy of mine was joking with me. He was like, it's an adjacent skill because you've laid out panels for comic books. Clearly you can go. But people, and but that's how people see you. You know what I mean? And it actually has very little to do with what's in your heart and what motivates you and what gets up in the morning. Similarly, I felt, and I'm talking about even before I write, I felt like a very similar tension in T'Challa. That extends all the way back to, him deciding to get an education in the West. Well, why? Wakanda is the most advanced civilization in the world. I mean, what is actually, going on here? Why are so many of his romances, if not all of his romances, with women who are not Wakandan? What's actually happening here? How can one, have the time, even if you're a genius, especially if you're a genius, to pursue, this sort of scientific longing when you're called to the day-to-day drudgery of being a king? How do you do both? And so those were like the, the kind of personal themes that I, wanted to explore. The fact that he did have a crown, not that somebody was trying to put a crown on, that he did have a crown on his head. And then actually what was in his heart also.
Okay. My question, I think, is related to that in the way that you have written about Wakanda. You pointed out in the last 10 years, in the sense of narrative, Wakanda has gone through a lot of trauma, but it feels like, and I'm not an expert, but just in the little bit I know of reading Black Panther before that, there was this image of Wakanda as unconquered and this image of pride and power. And it seems like in your writing right now, you've not just acknowledged what's happened to them, which has been traumatic and whatever, but you've also problematized in some ways like the mythology of Wakanda. And I was kind of wanting to know more about that, not just for what that means for Black Panther and this weight of being a leader, but also like in a way, Wakanda sort of represented this source of like, I don't know, pride or power or something, and then sort of pointing out like, well, what are some of the complexities in that society, sort of pulling that out and how that, I don't know, is a little bit different than what it seemed like it was, at least at the beginning, and how that sort of has developed for you as a writer.
Yeah, and I think it, for Wakandans in many ways, it still does represent, a source of pride. That's part of the problem, actually. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well, who am I? This was so central to my identity. This went away. Who am I? For me, it really, the book is really about an existential search for identity. That's true of T'Challa. That's true of Shuri, certainly right now. That is true of Tetu and Zenzi. That's true of Shangamiri. You know what I mean? Who is, as you see in Seven, seeing his theories, about what the country should be. As far as, he's concerned, taken to their logical conclusions, as he acknowledges. And that's certainly true for the country at large, for the actual, Wakandans, who are there, who, and now, in this era, being forced to ask themselves, why do we submit to a monarchy? Well, for a long time it kept us safe. It allowed us to enjoy this high, standard, this high quality standard of living. But when you've had like effectively a tsunami hit your country, I mean, literally in the sense of Namor, you know what I mean? What's that do? How you feel then? To me, that was where all the narrative juice was, so it was where I went.
I feel like the issue with Namor is resolved, or do you have plans to resolve that?
Because all of this is
Right. I feel like it actually kind of got resolved in Secret Wars, and I had plans to resolve it until I found out they were killing him. Yeah, he was actually supposed to be part of this story, and then my editor was like, Nemo's gonna be dead. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I can't do that, and I had to find another way. Yeah, well, they told me, well, no, he's dead right now, actually, and they're in the process of coming back, it looks like. But when I was writing, I had Namor in it, and when I sent my pictures in, they were like, by the time this comes out, Namor's gonna be dead, so that can't work, so. I mean, that happened a couple times. Even like with the crew, I was gonna use the originals, and there's some issues around using the Bradleys that don't have too much, to do with me. Rhodey was gonna be dead, which I was told, and so that was 2 right there. So then it became, all right, so what am I doing? You know what I mean? Should I, just bring Casper back? And I said, okay, well, let me rethink this. Maybe we can throw some women in the mix and do some other things. There's this, sort of tension between Storm and T'Challa. Maybe we can throw that in there. He already had this relationship, with Luke Cage. And then, there's some thoughts about what this might be in the future or what, and I'm talking about the whole team, what it might have been in the past. There was, Manifold dying, and the fact that T'Challa had kind of put him in that position. What was that? And so there was this idea that there was a lot of narrative tension to be gotten from actually putting a new group together.
Hi, I'm Alex. I have like a million questions, but I'm going to try to get them all into one round question. I know.
Just simple.
Let me see if I can do this. Basically, as a Black American writing about an abstracted fictional Africa, do you find any sort of like push-pull with that within yourself and from the media and from Marvel itself? And also, do you think, parentheses, that sort of the popularity of Black Panther has to do with perhaps he's not Luke Cage. He's not, like, the power isn't coming from right here in the streets. And so, like, white America, whatever, however nebulously you want to describe that, can sort of ascribe this to being, oh, okay, it's a fantasy, and so I'm not immediately threatened. Do you think that that's part of some of the Black Panthers' popularity?
I think, I answer the first. No, I haven't felt too much push-pull, and I certainly haven't gotten push-pull from Marvel in terms of depictions, or, not too much from the, I mean, what you see is what I thought, so if it's bad, it's me, and if it's good, it's my artists also. It's my co-creators also. In terms of, like Luke Cage, it's hard for me to make that case because Luke Cage has a television series right now. Sure. And when I was a kid, I couldn't have imagined, I don't know, the X-Men having a television series, much less Luke Cage. So it's really, really hard for me to argue that. I think a lot of his popularity comes from the suit and the fact he's named the Black Panther. I think it just, it connotes something, for Black fans in particular, and also for, large people. I've thought, often, had I done another book, what the reaction would have been like, and I don't think it would have been the same. I think just his look carries a kind of power that people get into right away.
The second part of my question is y'all hiring down there at Marvel? Or you got a hookup or editor I can talk to?
Hold on, wait, say that again?
Are y'all hiring or y'all looking right now?
Marvel's, I'm not hiring, I don't hire. But yeah, Marvel, as far as I'm concerned, they're always hiring. I think the question that you have to ask yourself is whether you want to work with Marvel or not, which is an own pushable. I love it, you know what I mean? To be clear, I absolutely love it. But I have been schooled by, several, indie, comic creators now, and it's probably definitely harder to make your own way, independently, but there's probably more of your own profit and more of your own control, to be had by going that way.
I wanted to ask about something about your process. Is your process with writing the Black Panther different from the process that you use when in your journalism work, or when you're writing a novel?
Yeah, and before I answer that, this is a nice sized crowd, so if you have questions, please go to the mic. What I don't want to happen is to finish and 10 people come up to me and say, I was too shy to ask this during the proper time, when there was time allotted for me to ask a question, and then you try to ask a question and I gotta go. So please don't be shy. Let's not do this. I'm here to answer questions, so just please line up and actually ask questions, please. Because me and Eric, we can talk all day. Which we're happy to do, if you don't want to ask questions. But then afterwards, I'm going to have to leave, so. Yeah, I mean, it actually was very similar. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of research that goes into actually, reporting for the Atlantic. So in that sense, it was very, very similar. And you also have to think like in a really, really logical and coherent way. It's funny because I'm working on a piece right now for the Atlantic, and I was, writing out the lead. And I was thinking, wow, I don't think I could have written this before I was writing comics. And part of it was the fact that there's so much. You have to always think about how things look. You always had to think about, how things look. Like I had, I was going back to the comic thing. I was, I'm working on the scripts for the next group of 12. And I was writing out the scene for the first one, and originally it was going to be T'Challa, and he was going to be going into the city of dead, to the city, the dead, to try in the necropolis, and try to have this conversation with Bast. And I was like, right, but what are we going to see? I mean, that's cool, and I understand if you were writing a novel, that would be cool. But do you have a cool image that can actually be seen? And I didn't have one. And so it forces you to think so much more visually. And so when I was doing this thing, actually, when I was going back to the Atlantic, I thought, God, I gotta, I want you to see this. I want you to be in this scene. I want you to be here. I want you to feel like it's happening. So it's, there's actually a lot of, interplay, I think, between the two.
So with that, given that with Black Panther, you're collaborating with Brian Stelfreeze, who's doing spectacular.
And Laura Martin and Chris Sprouse.
Yeah, and Chris Sprouse. How do you make the decision on like what I guess what to give him to and allow him to create that image that you may not see in your head.
Right. I give them as much information as I possibly can, and then say it's totally up to them. That's what I do. Because I think it always helps. I mean, you're free to reject, but it always, I know when I go to write, it always helps to have some scribblings down or some sort of idea as opposed to just hitting a blank page from nothing. And you can, look at, whatever, layout I have or whatever paneling I have and say, this does not work at all. The best example of this is there's a sequence in issue 4 after, there's a bombing. In what are we calling it now? In the Golden City, Burning Zenaria, which we're calling it now, I hope I got that right. Anyway, we're giving it a totally different name. There's a bombing in the city, and you have to, see this sort of narration, and then you have to see T'Challa realizing that, Ramonda's been hurt. And the last panel is him holding her up, and she has this cloth over her face, which somehow really connotes the idea that something really, really bad had happened. I didn't write that. I didn't write that in the paneling. I didn't say this is how she looks. No, I didn't write the veil at all. You know what I mean? I simply said, she looks, really injured. He has to go pick her up. But I didn't. But the veil does something so much more, and I absolutely could not have thought of. If you look at the way Chris laid out, those Jollier scenes, when she's going to. I mean, I had, the way he shifts the paneling, the way he uses portraiture over top of, extra, the actual scenes that are happening. That was not I had it literally blocked out. You know what I mean? But he came up with the notion, okay, we got to make this look a little different. There's in the latest issue, there's one, where he's, the story is told through fire. And I said, well, the images start appearing out of the campfire. But the way it was done and all that, to say nothing of the color schemes that he and Laura come up with, none of that is me at all.
So does that challenge you in
99% of the time, I'm tremendously pleased with what they come up with. I mean, and I think what happens is that's something that probably has to be dealt with at the moment you agree to work with the artist. Do you know what I mean? Because if I think, and just my first book, but if each issue, that didn't work, that panel, if I have too many, then something went wrong in the picking process. You know what I mean? It should be that you have that we're hiring your brain to come in and interpret, not, I'm questioning every step of the way. You know what I mean? What's actually happening, So that's them, and it should be them. You know what I mean? It's co-creation, and that should really, really means something. And there are times when I'm not 99%, on board, where I'm like halfway on board, and I usually just say, okay, that's you though. That's you. It would do no good for me to say, can you make this appear as I saw it in my head? I need to learn to draw then, if that's what's gonna happen.
This question actually sort of plays into that a little bit. I was doing my own research in preparation for today, and I saw that you had done this IO9 interview with Evan Narcisse, and it was wonderful, and he should interview everybody. But you mentioned that you have this perception of hardcore fans being artistic conservatives, which is just a great phrase. But I was wondering if you could expand a little on what you meant by that, and maybe if you could talk a bit about what conscious choices you and your artists have been making to sort of muck with that concept.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing you can do about that. It's actually, I think it's ingrained into comic, but there's nothing we can do. I think so just to explain the concept, like we were having this conversation, and Evan, I think, was channeling some of the reactions, some of the more negative reactions to Black Panther that, have been out there. And I think part of it is, let me explain this from my own fan perspective. When they undid the marriage between Spider-Man and between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, I stopped reading Spider-Man. Now, I didn't go onto, the internet and start, saying, you are the worst person. But there are people that did that. That happened. I definitely read that happening. You know what I mean? Jokers say they should be fired. Because it is, I read that, actually. I didn't go to conventions and ask questions. But that's not because the people that were doing that are any worse. It's just that my way of, being a fan is much more private, right? If I was that sort of person, I would have done exactly that. That was the Spider-Man I grew up with. Spider-Man I grew up with was married. Don't change it. You know what I mean? As opposed to a different perspective, which, I've only gotten hip to as an artist. Listen, every artist brings, what they bring to the character. You know what I mean? And you got to let them tell their story. Now, if at the end of the story is trash, you can say that. You certainly, this is not like you let people, do whatever, but when people come in and make radical change and say, this is the story I see, you gotta evaluate this. You gotta let the story play itself out and then evaluate on its merits. And I think what happens, from fans is like they come in, and again, I'm saying this as somebody who did this, right? Who was like this. You come in and the creator, or the creation as it was at that particular time, that's yours. That's yours. And thus, it ever should be, throughout, comic book history. And so that's tough. That's tough when you come in. I've actually talked to other creators about this. They say it's much easier if you're like an independent creator and you do something that's out of your own head. You know what I mean? You say this is it. Because then those expectations, are not quite there. There's nothing you can do about that. I think that's baked into the form. You know what I mean? I think what happens is if you're doing it good, if you're actually good at it, if you actually, create something that's worthwhile, you'll stand the test of history. And then I can talk to you in 20 years about that. You know what I mean? But the immediate reaction, you got to write, and please don't take this the wrong way. Please, no one take this wrong. You got to write past the fans. You know what I mean? And frankly, as a consumer, I want you to write past me. You know what I mean? Like all of the, the great stuff, all the comic book stories that I loved, all the stories, period, that I loved, you couldn't poll me to get them out. Do you understand what I'm saying? You shouldn't really be talking to me. You really shouldn't be engaging with me. You should, like Miles, your back should be to the crowd. And then after the performance is done, I'll tell you whether it sucks or not. But I'm gonna let you get through, you know what I mean? You gotta get through what you're doing. You can't go back and forth, writing to blow up the internet, as, Evan, said about something else. You gotta do what's in here, because the minute you stop doing what's in here, we can do a poll. We can write Black Panther via poll. You know what I mean? We could do that, but I don't want to read other people doing that in their art form, and so, I can't really do it here. There is something particularly intense about comic book fans that's different, than other art forms. But you take the good with the bad. The good is here we are right here talking about it, right? And the bad is some other things that I've experienced. But overall, it's a good experience.
Hey, what's going on, Mr. Coates? So I remember you saying that you grew up reading comics, right? And so now that you're working in the industry, I was curious about your thoughts pre comic book work? Like, what were, maybe your expectations going into it? And now that you've experienced, or you're still experiencing, how do you feel now? What are some of your thoughts compared to how you felt before?
I didn't realize how important the artists were. I just did. I didn't, no disrespect. But I didn't. I mean, that was like before there was art that I liked, and I could have told you I like that art, but I didn't understand how much if the art is not high level, how much that impacts the story. I didn't get it. I mean, Brian is a co-creator in the truest sense. The relationship is like, I don't know, is it screenwriter to director, and the artist is actually, the director? Maybe with the screenwriter having a little bit more power than they actually do in Hollywood, but it's very a screenwriter, director, thing. And, Brian and Chris, I mean, they're the Spielbergs, they're the, Christopher Nolans. That's, where they sit in terms of the story actually being, what it is. That's how important they are. And I just, I didn't understand. So much so that I've gone back and read back issues and thought, like it's caused me to rethink, what I like and what I don't like. There were artists I knew who I loved, but I didn't understand how important it was to the creative process until I actually started writing.
How you doing, Mr. Coates? My name is Mungaliso Toure. I think there's a responsibility to the character that is often neglected in terms of Black Panther. And I give an example. When they had Storm and Black Panther break up, they had them have a physical fight. When Reginald Hudlin introduced the concept that Wakanda was an unconquered nation, meaning they'd never been taken over by any imperialistic powers and so forth, people ran with that in the wrong direction, thinking that Wakanda was a utopia. And it was never a utopia. You can read the Don McGregor work. Not utopia. You've seen the conflicts that happen, the inner strife in the relationships. You can read the Christopher Priest stories. None of the problems, lots of problems. So the idea, I think, was a false one to create this concept that Wakanda was some type of utopian perfect society. I think in terms of editorial, there has to be some type of mandate in which you are consistent with the character. Like Hudlin had, in his point, he had the Black Panther fight Doom in one comic, and he has his armor, and he's all prepared for Dr. Doom. And then in the next time he confronts Dr. Doom, he's in a chokehold, getting blasted and put near death. There are certain inconsistencies that happen.
In his defense, in Hudlin's defense, he was ambushed in that case. Like, he actually thought he was going to see, sorry to get nerd out here, but this was like the research. He actually thought he was going to see Namor, and he got ambushed.
Right, but how someone supposed to be prepared as a Black Panther get ambushed so amateurishly? I'm not saying he can't be ambushed, but there's a certain type of way you write that ambush, a certain type of way you put into it. There has to be a nuance and a complexity to it.
I mean, he was going to see his boy. Like, it wasn't... No. And he had the Dora Milaje with him. I mean, he was sorry to, get into this, but it wasn't
we can get into it. I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like he just, said, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of went out strolling in the park and, got hit. I mean, he probably thought he had some protection from Namor. They were on friendly terms.
But he did. But we're talking about a person who has preparation skills. We're talking about a person who has a vibranium microwave armor on, and he got blasted as if he's wearing spandex. And then he just stands there and gets hit. No dodging, no nothing. Just hit me, boom, and he's down. And then he's in a coma. And then another thing they do, like this whole thing with the spiritual aspect. He's part of the spiritual path, mythology of Wakanda. He doesn't need somebody to help him get to these spiritual points. He's already there. He's already initiated. But they ignore that. And that's why I think some of the problems are, because there's an editorial mandate. Even in your work, one of the things I was curious about was when T'Challa was fighting these different guys, you said they were superhuman. And in terms of in-story narrative, we don't read that they're superhuman. We just had to, by your interviews, you said that.
Wait, which fights you talking about?
The guards and people he's fighting in issue 2 and 3.
No, they're not superhuman.
The guy who body slammed T'Challa wasn't superhuman? A regular person body slammed T'Challa?
Yeah. But you gotta follow what happens. But what happens after that? What happens after he gets...
T'Challa gets up and power forces him through the wall.
Right. Hold up. But that's kind of important. Because not like he got body slammed, that was the end of the fight, right?
No. What I'm saying is...
Like he used that to do something else.
Right, but I'm saying an ordinary person, and this is what McGregor did a lot with T'Challa, he kind of depowered T'Challa to a degree that ordinary people could do things with him. Child is a person who.
I guess what I'm saying is you gotta like look at the whole fight.
I looked at the whole fight, and the ordinary human got pushed 30 feet through a solid wall. Human couldn't survive that. But so I looked at the whole fight. So I mean, I think it makes more sense when you said that they were a superhuman group. It makes sense to me.
No. Because I think we can get like I'm nerding out here. We don't have to do the whole thing.
I know.
But it's like if we start, for instance, like in what is it, issue 6? I mean, he gets hit in the back of the head with it. What is it, a rifle butt?
Yeah.
And is knocked out and carried it. But that's not the end of the thing.
I agree with you. I agree with you
what I'm saying
on
is there's certain like there's a little bit of playing like this, like playing possum or allowing you something.
I agree with
that
that.
happen to yourself. That's like part of it. When he takes off his mask, hit me. You remember that? That's like issue 5.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's part of it too. You know what I mean? So I think like I mean I was saying earlier, like I feel like we read comic books in different kinds of ways, right? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's different things that different people are looking for comics, from comics. As I talked about it, like a big thing for me is the internal thing. You know what I mean? Like that's a huge, thing. And I'll just, I have no problem admitting this at all. I don't sit around with a power chart and look at T'Challa's opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's not actually what guides me in a lot of my writing. There's certain writing like that. There's certain writers who do that. You know what I mean? There's certain, I think, I guess I imagine so. But certainly there's a desire for that. But for me, it really is who he is inside. You know what I mean?
I can agree with that fully. And as I end this, the thing.
It's good. We can do this all day, honestly.
No. He told me I had to end this, so I mean, I had to be respectful to that. But what I was saying is, I think this editorially, there has to be a consistency with scale and with the ability to
the problem is like the problem is actually an absence of editorial mandate. Like the problem is actually it's the different creators who come in and see the character in different ways. So when McGregor sees him, I don't think there's a vibranium weave suit at that time. Yeah, because I think Priest basically adds that. And so if you read him like from Priest to McGregor, it makes sense. That whole storyline where he goes into South Africa, like none of that makes sense because there are things that happen to him where you're like, come on, you know what I mean? But you got to you got to extend some charity to his or her vision of the character, and then just sort of say, okay, in this world, this is what's happening because it's their world that. And at the end, I ain't like that at all. You certainly unfair to say that. Like with McGregor, like you can say, man, I couldn't deal with McGregor. I just couldn't take that. You know what I mean? But you gotta allow for some consistency within the actual creator that's actually doing it. That's what I would say. Sorry about that, y'all. I love this stuff. You know what I'm saying? I spent like what? I don't know, 4 or 5 months by myself in a room doing just that. By myself. So I'll do it all day.
Greetings. My name is Jennifer Williams from the Department of African American Studies at Temple University. And I was wondering, because me and a lot of my colleagues are actually trying to write or trying to use comic books as a text in our work. And I was wondering, one, what do you think the future of comic books as academic texts will be? And two, how do you think your version of Black Panther could be used as an academic text?
I have no ability to answer that. I don't. I mean, I just you asked me about the problems of actually creating the thing. I can answer all of those, but and this is not like a blow up, but you need somebody outside of the creative process to do that. Like you need somebody who can see it. I'm inside. I can't. It's very hard for me to. I understand why I find it compelling as a person. I can't tell you whether a classroom would find it compelling or even why they would find it compelling. Sorry.
But that your work is being used, being taught academically.
Yeah, I know, and it's bizarre because I dropped out of school and I was never a good student. That's what I'm saying. I actually don't understand it. I'm not faking. You have to understand. You take it within. If you looked at my life story and my lack of success in school, it is bizarre to ask me how to use my work in school. Because I don't really understand school. I'm not playing it. I really I was flummoxed by it. You know what I mean?
How much of your time do you allocate to the comic as opposed to your other writing?
Too much. Way too much. A lot.
Is that because you're drawn into it now?
I wouldn't say it's more fun. I think it's a new world that I haven't I've never been there before, and it brings me a kind of immediate joy that other things don't. I mean, I get joy. You know, I'm working on like a big long piece for the Atlantic right now, and I get joy, but I mean, I'll just give you a preview. I guess I can say this. So I'm like writing issue 13 right now, and there's this scene where, thank you. You know, we just had this big fight. I'm glad you'll keep reading. No, I'm messing with you. I'm joshing. There's this scene, I don't think this ain't giving away anything. There's a scene that opens it up, at least as I have it written right now, between T'Challa and this, you know, the Council of the Dead of all these, you know, previous, you know, kings that have been. And I was writing it, and one of the joyous things, like I tried to give everybody personalities, and I gave them different names. You know, some of them are really protective of T'Challa. Some of them resent the fact of being called on. You know, one guy resents that he used to have like a consort of women, and he resents that he's being summoned up, but T'Challa didn't summon up his, you know, consorts. You know, and he jokes about that. You know what I mean? You know, there's some that are crafty. And I was like, God, this is so fun. Like, even if nobody ever sees that, even if I decide to scrap that scene completely and say this cannot be in the book, like, it was just fun. I mean, it was just like immediately, it's like, you know, being 8 and playing with your G.I. Joes and Transformers again. You know what I mean? And so that's probably why I spend, you know, writing about reparations is not like that. It's not like playing with your G.I. Joes and your Transformers. It's not. So it's just immediately much more fun. Yeah.
Hi. My question was, are you currently taking any writing workshops, or do you plan to teach any in the future, and like in person, online?
Yeah, I did before, but I am ambivalent about how much I should be doing that right now. You know, life is so short. And when I think about dying, I think the worst way, like, to die is to, like, in my last moment, think, wait, but I didn't get to. And I know that's how I'm gonna be anyway. Like, whenever I die, like, I probably would be like that anyway if I have, you know, I'm lucky enough to have any sort of conscious thought. But I wanna, like, minimize that list. You know, I want it to be like 2 or 3 things as opposed to, you know, 20 or 30 things. And so the time you spend teaching, it's not to say I might end up doing, you know, some of it, but the time you spend teaching everything, the time you spend doing everything else except taking care of your health and being good to your family, it's time taken away from, you know, fulfilling that list.
I had a question.
Even being here, by the way. Although I'm happy to be here.
Because we have the Black Panther movie on the horizon. And the movie, in a nerd rage, I actually stopped reading Black Panther because I got angry.
What happened?
I did not like the marriage to Storm. I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't like that either.
It felt forced.
It felt so forced.
And at the time, she was dating Wolverine.
Right.
At the time, like, they were like,
right.
that
and
was the
just
thing.
Was like, eh.
And then and it was just like, and I was just like, what?
And it was like 20 years of tension leading up to Wolverine and Storm dating.
They
like,
kissed so many times on panel.
Yeah,
like, I have a screensaver that's just them kissing.
Yeah, it's like, so, why are we doing this?
Like, I'm a big. The ship is called Rolo. I'm a big Rolo shipper. I like Storm and Wolverine together. I think they make sense.
Well, the one thing I will say though about that is I did not like that, but again, part of being loyal to continuity is it did happen.
It did happen.
It did happen.
It did happen. So, and again, and it's not that I can't be swayed, but I didn't.
Right.
It was like I wanted more of a story. It's like, if this is what's happening, make me believe it.
I agree with you.
And I just felt like it wasn't handled like it should have been handled. So I like completely was like, no more Black Panther. Yeah. But the movie came out, and and he's in it, and Chadwick Boseman just blew it out the water. At one point, I almost rolled out of my seat, and I was like, Barack is my president, T'Challa is my king. Yeah. Like, that is how I felt. So for me, Panther just like, it renewed like the love of it. The movie did, and so then that's when I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go back to the book. So I just want to, like, as the scribe who's like, laying down, Wakanda right now, like, what are your thoughts on the movies? Do you hope that they pull from your run? Do you hope they consult with you, or, will you be involved in the creative process at all?
Are you going to be involved in?
No. No. I mean,
No.
I talked to Ryan is a friend of mine, and I talked to him.
Oh, cool.
But Ryan's gonna do what Ryan does, and I think it's gonna be gorgeous.
No, yeah, I mean,
the person he's actually pulling from, I think I can say this, is the person who he probably, like, if you look for any influence, it's probably Brian Stelfreeze. That I think you will definitely see that.
okay.
Evidence of that, in the movie. But no. I think, most of his stuff is gonna be like Priest and maybe some Hudlin. That's gonna be his big influence.
Cool. Are you personally excited?
Yeah. I mean, listen, man. Creed is the best Rocky.
Yes.
Creed is the best Rocky. I mean, it is. It's just an incredible. I mean, that shot, I guess here in Philly where they're, on the bikes and he's running to go meet.
Yeah, that's in North Philly. They in this neighborhood.
That's like the best. That's like one of the best scenes, period. And one of the most beautiful, depictions of blackness that I've ever seen. So they picked like the right dude to do it, So I expect this to be classic. I really do. I fully expect him to, to kill it, So no, I'm tremendously excited. I can't wait.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's great to meet you. I just wanted to, Mike from Reelblack, by the way, and come see Abby here on Friday. But the power of imagination. I mean, what it opened my mind. Like, you write a lot about real things and real life things. Can you just speak to the power of imagination? Sometimes the lack of imagination that we see when black folks are depicted in our art.
Well, I think the question is, and I guess this is why I began, about the importance of supporting black institutions. I think there's plenty of imagination, among black folks, and there's plenty of imaginative power among black folks, and you see that probably most, explicitly over the past, 30, 40 years now, in hip hop. But in order to deploy that in comic books, in order to deploy that in television, in order to deploy that in film, you got to have institutions. You got to have institutions, and you got to have artists who care about those institutions, with the power to do that. I think that's certainly, and we see that getting better, actually, I think. But that certainly was the major question of my youth. Why is all of this vitality and energy that I see, in my community, why is all, the sort of beautiful art that I see, why can't we have that? I mean, one way, thinking about the way I write the book is, this is like my, Middle Earth. Like, this is like, and I wanted it to have that kind of thickness and fullness. Like, it's not just, a country is not just a country, and Wakanda's not just, Wakanda's a nation. You know what I mean? So like in 5, when, the griot tells, Shuri, listen, either I am a nation or I am nothing. I mean, that's the story also. You know what I mean? So like, and you'll see more of that in World of Wakanda, by the way. But I mean, that, like, you want like that complete and total fullness. You want past, you want backstory, you want myth, you want, gods, you want religion, you want science. I mean, you want all of that, fullness. You want to feel like you were going somewhere, and, when people come up to you, don't bother me right now. Don't bother me right now, because I am here. I'm in Wakanda. I'm not just watching, slam, bam, pow. I'm lost in another world, and I'm mystified by that. That's what you're trying to achieve.
All right, Anthony Dandridge. I had a question. I was wondering, do you see, it's a general and then a specific question, do you see art or comic books in general as political tools? And more specifically, do you think that Black Panther consciously is a political tool?
Yeah, always. I mean, to answer the first question, yeah, they're always political tools. It's very difficult to create art that has no political import at all. Certainly, it's very difficult to create narrative that has no political import at all. And people who think that they are creating narrative that has, no political import are usually verifying the overarching politics of the day. It's simply inescapable. You know what I mean? Having said that, I think like the way it works when you're making the art is you have to make the art and the politics have to be somewhere back here. So you're not thinking consciously as you write out, the lines, you know what I mean? As you write out the dialogue, as you state, you're well within the craft, but there have to be some assumptions about the politics that happen before you go to write. And then when you go to write, you kind of just gotta, say, okay, this is the assumed world. One of the things I, assumed about, Wakanda is that Wakanda was that it was a human society, that it was complicated, that it had, as I said, all the richness, of anybody else's, mythical and, created society. And then those were my assumptions, and I ran from that. Is that a political statement? Yeah, it is. I mean, if you live in a country, in a world, as we do, where people regularly demean and dehumanize black humanity, yes. You know what I mean? If you live in a country where a Black Lives Matter, movement needs to actually happen, yes, it's a statement. If you live in, a world in which, you go to your various social media and you see, black people being choked to death, being shot by agents of the state to assert that black people have humanity, yes, that is a statement. Yes, it is. You know what I mean? And by the way, I think it plays a very, very vital role long term, in those problems being diminished. Because part of the reason why people can stomach the laws and the policies that make that possible in the first place is they don't see you as human. And art has, a very foundational role in making sure that we see each other as human beings.
So I am a teacher, so I still teach, I am teaching. And so I appreciate that you're like, my time is precious. But can you speak a little bit to process? I mean, I know this is a question that you get all of the time, but can it be a question a little bit about what do you do when you sit down and you're like, I just have the germ of an idea? How do you get from the germ of the idea to the 10,000 word reparations article?
You're right. You're right.
What does it look like?
It looks like me sitting down and going like this, or like this. I'm serious. It's not that complicated. The difficulty of it is the fact that it's so simple. That's actually the difficulty of it, because what I find we want like something, what we're asking for is an answer to get us away from the actual pain of writing. And there's nothing that can get you away from it. It's like, here's the brick wall, it's in front of me. I don't have a shovel, I don't have a pickaxe. How am I gonna get through it? I'm gonna bang my head against it until the brick wall falls. Is that gonna hurt? Yes. Yes, but if I do it enough times, the brick wall, will fall. Or I will, one or the other's gonna happen. But that's the only answer. I mean, there's no over, there's no under, there's only through. And that's it. That's it. It's just that there's nothing that I'm doing, or I think that any writer's doing, that is particularly magical. What you were doing is something very simple and basic. You're starting with the germ of an idea, as you said. You're researching that idea to as much as you can, and then you're sitting. I mean, my son's right here. He's watched me. The piece I'm working on right now, he has seen me all this week, sitting at the kitchen table, right? What did it look like? Boring. Look boring. Look very ordinary. There was no sparkles, there was no stars, there was no muse, there was no inspiration. It's just like me sitting in front of a laptop, getting up from time to time, walking around, talking to myself, a lot of talking to myself, and that's it.
Is it different when you're doing a comic book?
No.
Okay.
Same thing.
All right, thank you.
Same thing.
Well, I wanted to thank you, first of all, for sharing your time. And I know myself, and I'm sure probably a lot of other folks, like as soon as I heard you were coming, it was like, okay, check my calendar, do this, get the babysitter, get everything, you just, get everything out. As a politics nerd and a black geek, it was like, oh my God, that's the perfect thing to go see. But my question is, so what makes you geek out? Like, what do you say, oh my God, I gotta drop my calendar because Nikki Giovanni's gonna be at this place and I gotta do that, or what?
I don't go out too much no more, you know that? I really don't. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think, like, basically, when my son was born, actually when my wife got pregnant, I think, at that point, and I was in my 20s, like my early 20s, at that point I settled, like, it changed my life. I used to go out a lot, and I settled into this place of, I mean, one of the cool things about having a kid when you're that young, if you're a writer, is if you're doing it right, you actually can be a parent and write at the same time. You actually can, because at least for me, like, I didn't, maybe this was me specific, I didn't have a particular routine for writing. If I had some free time, I sit down and write. You know what I mean? And that generally was it. And so I pretty much It's 24 hours in a day. You know, I have to give, you know, an allotted time to my family. That's non-negotiable. I got to give an allotted time to my health. That's non-negotiable. And the rest is my writing. And that's pretty much it. What that means is I probably don't do a lot of things. I don't go to the movies too much. I wish I went to the museum more. That's why I really like visual art. You know what I mean? I really wish I did more of that. I don't hear too much live music, you know, which I did when I was younger. Right. You know what I mean? These are just the sort of, you know, losses you take. But I don't know. I geek out over the things that I actually probably participate in. You know what I mean? I geek out over comic books. Mm-hmm. You know, I was just, you know, sitting there, you know, just standing over there rereading stuff. You know, I geek out over, you know, that. Mm-hmm. I geek out over, you know, magazines. Mm-hmm. You know, which is the thing that I do. I still love narrative, mm-hmm. you know, but it's a simple life. It's a really, really simple life.
Thank you.
Folks, we do got to wrap it up. Mr. Coates has to be on his way. But again, make some noise for Ta-Nehisi Coates and Eric Battle, ladies and gentlemen.
The reason why Donald Trump is where he's at, if we relate it to film, I think there's some films people need to see that point to the danger of why Donald Trump is so important with his cult of personality.
What makes me mad is all the gangbangers, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the gangbangers that are supposed to be banging and shit. Okay, the cops are killing us. Why aren't you shooting at them for us? What happened, gangbangers? All of a sudden they at home and shit. Motherfuckers are at home. We're all these tough gangbangers. We need you. Hello? Hey, man, the Italians got mafia. Like the Italians, you know what I love about the mafia, the Italians? They protect their neighborhoods. They protect their neighborhoods. They protect their people. We're the only motherfuckers that have no mafia. Black people don't got a mafia. We can't even organize crime.